What is the internet?
The internet is like a popular thing. Some satellites up there. I picture in my head with like waves of internet going to the phone. Somebody's told me a problem. The internet is all like forming.
It's always moving.
It's always moving.
In the early 1970s, my partner Bob Kahn and I began working on the design of what we now call the internet. It was a result of another experiment called the ARPAnet, which stood for Advanced Research Projects Agency Network. It was a Defense Department research project. Paul Barron was trying to figure out how to build a communication system that might actually survive a nuclear attack. So he had this idea of breaking messages up into blocks and sending them as fast as possible in every possible direction through the mesh network. So we built what eventually became a nationwide experimental packet network.
Nationwide is on your side.
And it worked.
ARPAnet. It started fairly small.
In 1969, researchers for DARPA sent the first data between computers in Los Angeles and Stanford over ARPANET, using a technology that would eventually evolve into the modern internet.
ARPANET used packet switching from the start, and its packets traveled over phone lines. Packet switching, where different computers send messages along the same set of wires instead of each getting one. To communicate with each other, they just send a message, called a packet, along the wire.
In order to avoid congestion of the lines, the sent files were divided into smaller packets, which were put together again at the receiver.
To put it back together properly into driving direction,
TCP slaps a header onto each packet that contains instructions on what order to reassemble the packets into, as well as error checking information so that the receiving computer knows whether the packet's data arrived without any mishaps. After this is done, the packets are pushed onto the creatively named Internet layer, which uses the Internet Protocol, or IP, to attach both the origin and destination IP addresses, so the packet knows where it came from and where it's going.
Any device can communicate with any other device, just like you want to be able to make phone calls to any other telephone in the world.
The first international connections to ARPANET are introduced in England and Norway. By the mid-1970s, other U.S. government-based networks spring up in the Department of Energy, NASA, and CSNet, developed for the computer science community through funding from the National Science Foundation. Throughout the 80s, networks began independently popping up across the country.
Because we had the backbone, people started building regional networks. For example, in New York State, we had the New York State Net.
The ARPANET allowed for universities and researchers to share information. It also influenced all of the later computer networks.
There's nothing like this that has ever been built. Continued growth of the infrastructure of the network to bring it to people who don't have access to it yet.
The internet has become an essential part of everyday communication and everyday life.